This video is sponsored by you. Links to support the channel are in the description. Hello there, Arknights most hated YouTuber here. Once again reminding you that is just a slogan. Today we will be reviewing every Year 1 operator, defined as every operator released from launch to May 1st, 2020 in CN. There are some rules. First, we'll be assuming you have an optimal account and that the operators are at optimal levels. This is because in a gacha every account will be inherently different, and to make valid operator reviews, you either review them in a vacuum or by accounting every other option possible. Every operator is the best operator if you only have them. We'll also be assuming you are a normal player not doing any niche nights. This also includes faction nights. But I'll explain that better when we get to a certain someone. Also, don't take the tier list part of this too seriously. With so many operators, some placements are bound to be out of whack compared to others I haven't considered or that I forgot. It's just there for your zoomer brains. Before we move on, I am gonna introduce a new tier. The what the f***, what were you thinking, why would you do this tier. And I am gonna move Frostleaf here. This is because her module recently came out, and let me tell you, this was the easiest motherfucking fix in the universe. They could have so easily rescued Frostleaf from being the worst operator in the game, but they just didn't. They just needed to lower or remove the attack speed debuff in her talent. And modules already are made to tweak and buff talents, but instead they gave her an RNG chance to cold. Not even freeze. You need the RNG to proc twice in a row for it to freeze. So I ask, what the f***? What were you thinking? Why would you do this? This tier will be reserved for the absolute most irredeemable and utterly confusing and perplexing operators. It's the polar opposite of the EX tier. Try to guess who is gonna join this elusive tier in the future in the comments. I'm gonna use it very sparingly. Catapult is our first Year 1 operator. Believe it or not, she wasn't a launch operator. This means that some asshole at Hypergriff headquarters looked at Arknights and said, you know what this game really needs? Catapult. She's F tier. She's not just a 3-star, but easily the worst 3-star. Her numbers are complete trash, and her skill might as well not exist. Beehunter makes me deeply sad. I've explained this before, but I'll do it again. Brawlers, as an archetype, are inherently disadvantaged due to how damage calculation works. Defense is a flat subtraction, meaning you want one big hit so the defense calculation is only applied once, rather than a bunch of quick hits that deal little damage. She was also given an odd dodge niche that is a meme and nothing else, and a skill too that barely does anything. F tier. Nightmare. Man, we are on an F tier streak, aren't we? What the f were they cooking at the start of Year 1? Skill 1 gives her the nichest niche that has ever niched. She is a healer for caster knights. It's never worth it to use this because you could just bring a healer. Or an abjurer if you really want a unit that deals damage and heals. Or Ridalter. Skill 2 is actively contradictory with itself. She deals true damage to enemies in accordance to how many tiles they travel, but also gives them 60% slow so they travel less tiles. You could pair her with a pusher to make the enemies travel a bunch of tiles, but as a rule of thumb, generally, if an operator needs someone else to work, they are not a very good operator. Keep that in mind, by the way. Keep that notion well inside your f***ing skull, by the way. That's important. We're gonna need it soon. It's a surprise tool that will help us later. Oh, and also Weedy S3 just does all of this on her own. F tier.
So, Supa really wants me to dig into Grani, and he's not entirely wrong for that. Okay, he's not very wrong at all for that, but I think Grani is still usable. Her kit as it stands is weird. Imagine taking Messi, after his decades of work on perfecting his craft, and then throw him into the kitchen of a 5-star restaurant. Both things are good alone, but combining them is just weird. Grani being a charger vanguard with a defensive kit is strange. However, it has its moments. Grani is far from great, especially in later stages, I fully acknowledge that. However, being a frontline vanguard that is hard to kill does come in handy plenty in earlier stages and events. Plenty of my old auto deploys have a Grani. Is she good? No. Even okay? Not really. Unusable? I don't think so. D tier.
By the way, that was Living Rain. They're gonna appear again in this video. Drop them a sub, they make great content. And now, Skadi. E tier. And be glad she's not in F. Let me explain that, okay? She's not good. She was never good. And she will never be good in the future. Let's get the major cope out of the way. No, the fact that she's good in an Abyssal Hunter squad doesn't f***ing matter. Let's say you have a team. In that team you put Skadi, Gladia, Andreana, Spectre and Spectre Alter. I'll give you that. Now that Skadi is on 500 steroids like the f***ing Liver King, she's quite good. But let me bring your attention to a tiny detail you might have noticed. You just used 4 f***ing squad slots to make 1 unit good. Do you wanna know what's better than that? Just using 5 operators that are good without needing to be babysat by their lesbian polycule. The issue with, oh but she's good in the AH squad, Supa, is that running an Abyssal Hunter squad will always inherently be just worse than using other operators that are good on their own in those squad slots. And let's be real, the Abyssal Hunter squad is just a Spectre buff army. Spectre is the only worthwhile units here. So not even in her own f***ing niche is she the best one. And this also applies to Gladia, by the way. A lot of people last time were mentioning, oh but Supa, what about the shut up? She stays in C tier where she belongs. So how are you supposed to use Skadi? There's 2 ways, either as a bootleg boss killer or as a bootleg fast redeploy. With skill 3 she gains a gigaton of attack, defense and HP. One small issue, 90 SP cost. 90! You need to take out a f***ing loan to use this skill more than once. Also, she's just worse than a lot of other options. Even Viviana is better, so this is her less preferred playstyle. Not even the module literally necromancing her back from the pearly gates of heaven could help her. So let's look at the bootleg fast redeploy style. You'll use skill 2 for this one. Almost 3 times the attack for 30 seconds after deployment. With module 2, she goes down to a whopping 40 seconds of redeployment time, 20 at double speed. Before you ask, that's 5 seconds slower than an Agent Vanguard and 22 seconds slower than an actual fast redeploy. This is not that good, especially when Texas Alter, Yato Alter, and Nurl Alter do far more for you without needing 5 f***ing squad slots. But Super, Nurl Alter takes 87.5 seconds to redeploy. She's 47.5 seconds slower than Skadi. That's fair, but Nurl gets a bunch of shields, a shit ton of physical damage, a stun, and most importantly, she doesn't consume a deployment slot. You're getting a lot of bang for your buck. The huge redeployment time sucks, but she more than makes up for it. Skadi is an odd middle ground between actual fast redeploys and Nurl Alter. For the increased redeployment time of 40 seconds instead of 18, her performance isn't that much better at all than Texas's, especially considering you can use Texas a lot more often. Skadi also doesn't have the insane utility of Nurl Alter. Again, to make Skadi good, you need to use 4 additional squad slots, 2 of which are completely worthless units that will gather dust in the bottom selection bar. Golly gee, maybe it's more worthwhile to use 1 good unit and 4 more good units instead. Skadi walked so Agent Vanguards could run. The difference in redeployment time isn't that big, but the main thing is that agents do much more beside being redeployed fast. Ines would be still f***ing amazing even if she had a normal redeployment time. Skadi would be F tier without it. She relies on this pseudo-fast redeploy niche, but just plainly does it worse than actual fast redeploys and Nurl Alter. She's not in F tier just because at least she can be pretty decent if you run this pseudo-fast redeploy style, but it's just outclassed by everything. E tier. Midnight is kinda cool for a 3-star. He deals both physical and arts damage. He's really good in IS too, but ultimately a 3-star, E tier. Chen is the second bad blue woman in Year 1. Her only real niche in present day is Talent 1 that gives somewhat automatic SP recovery to allies that don't have them. In short, her one claim to fame is making Thorns slightly better. You have no reason to ever use her as a standalone unit. Initially, her main niche was with skill 2 as a heli drop. Drop her in, her skill is automatically charged on deployment, and let it rip for a ton of damage. It's just unreliable nowadays. The range is a bit odd compared to better options. She'll most likely just die before she gets to charge it again, and if she does, the enemy is probably out of range already, and you can only use it once every 70 seconds if you retreat her. Skill 3 is the best skill right now. It has decent range and solid damage, while making her invulnerable for the very brief duration. D tier. I swear I am not usually this negative, but Greyy is yet another bad unit from Year 1. We have yet to break the C tier. He's an AoE caster, so crippled from the start, but his skills also cost way too much SP for what they do. There's almost no real uses for this guy. F tier. Popukar is also very neat. For a 3-star, she does her job well. She's also amazing in IS, especially during the current IS4. Ridalter is the absolute MVP of the mode, and her voucher set will get you Popukar and Orchid, which do their jobs very well. Still a 3-star though, so E tier. Spot, F tier. Do I even need to elaborate? He's a 3-star first of all, and for his one skill he doesn't even get the good Healing Defender skill, he gets the shit one. He's also not good in IS because Gummy exists, my beautiful, beautiful wife. Swire continues our massacre of Year 1 operators, which is a shame because she is a great waifu. Her thing is buffing melee operators a lot in her surrounding tiles. Optimally, it's a 36% attack buff, which is pretty solid. It's just awkward to use. The operator needs to be really close to Swire, and it has an offensive recharge. Optimally, she needs to attack 15 times before you can use her best buff. With the module, she gains SP passively, but you still need to wait 45 seconds for it to charge on first activation. It's just extremely sluggish. Other than that, she does nothing. F tier. With Sussurro, finally, we have our first good year 1 operator. You look at her silly ass and you're like, meh, 4-star medic, whatever. But actually, would you believe me if I told you she has the highest HPS, heal per second, in the game? Well, Blemishine technically has higher HPS, but you don't use her to heal. Sussurro has the highest HPS in the game for an operator you actually want to be healing. The quote-unquote downside is you can only use her skill twice per stage, but I have yet to find one stage where you actually need to use it more than twice, including Annihilation. She's unironically better than Shining in most situations. A tier. Glaucus is still the dictionary definition of mid. S1 is just okay, and S2 is also just kinda alright. She is the most operator in Arknights. C tier. Schwarz unfortunately got kinda cucked twice. First by Frostleaf and then by Poziomka, but she still has an edge over both. Against higher defense targets, she's better than Frostleaf, and in maps where you can't accommodate for Poziomka's typewriter, she's better than her. Schwarz, Frostleaf and Poziomka kind of have this perfect triad amongst them. None is necessarily strictly superior over the others. A tier. Ceylon might have the silliest gimmick in the game, right behind Insider targeting enemies wielding ranged weapons. Her one talent works best when there are water tiles on the map. Do you have any idea how little stages that is? She's essentially just Lumen, but 10 times worse, and Lumen is free, so she really doesn't have a place anywhere. E tier. Myrtle. You can make an actual fair argument for Myrtle being the best operator in the game, but you can say with certainty that she was the most impactful operator ever released in the history of Arknights. The meta we have today comes directly from Myrtle. Myrtle and her consequences have been a disaster for Rhodes Island. You can watch this video I made a while back for the full story, but back when she came out, Myrtle was so meta-warping that the game changed around her. And even today, she's in every team all the time. Bagpipe is a contender for the best operator in the game, for the most part because she makes Myrtle better. Here's her skill 1. You can read it as the next operator you deploy costs 14 less DP. I don't think I need to explain why that's broken. EX tier. Helagur is a senile old man, and his kit showcases it perfectly. His one niche is having a really good dodge on skill 2. Sometimes you can get away with just letting him wail on a boss without getting mogged. It's not very worth it though, and it's RNG reliant. Still, he does something, right? D tier. Astasia is just a really simple arts lane holder. She's not that good, and falls behind literally almost every other lane holder in the game. She doesn't even have a unique niche like Moose, and Viviana directly power-crept her now. E tier.
In theory, Dur Nar is great. A real jack of all trades who can do a little of a lot. Now the problem with that is in a game so segmented into niches, you might as well just take someone who actually does the thing you need. She's not a bad unit, her arts damage is useful, she's a decent defender, but like, if you need melee arts damage from a 4-star, that's all Moose does. If you need a tanky 4-star, you can just use Rammus from League of Legends' mentally challenged cousin. All in all, not good, but not awful. C tier.
Flamebringer, historically speaking, was one of our first notoriously horrible units. Back then, people were coping even for Franca, but Flamebringer united all of us under his flag of being bad. He just doesn't have the numbers to really do anything. His skills are for lane holding, but the Dreadnought archetype implicitly kind of can't really do that, as they only block one and are meant to duel strong opponents. F tier. Vermol just kind of exists. Her claim to fame isn't even anything related to the actual game. It's the fact that her own official artist has drawn plenty of porn of her, making her possibly the only operator with official hentai. Just for that, I'd put her in S tier, but realistically she's pretty bad. She doesn't do anything of note at all. Essentially every sniper ever is better. She has no unique thing going for her. F tier. Executor is also a sad case of just not having the numbers, continuing the slaughter that is year 1 so far. His skills simply cost way too much. 70 goddamn SP for the equivalent of 1/8 of a Moinar. He's power-crept by Pinecone. It's pretty sad. E tier. I bet you forgot Breeze is in the game. She's so forgettable there is an entire video essay on why she is so forgettable. It doesn't mean she's bad though. Her skills are actually pretty unique for her class. Skill 2 makes her an actual area of effect healer. She fires an ally, heals them and everyone around them. It's a splash heal. However, 80 SP. You may be noticing a trend with year 1 operators so far, which is just outrageous SP costs for skills that should, at most, cost 20. D tier. Ethan is actually good. Finally. Good lord, year 1 didn't have many hits so far, did it? Just a bunch of stinkers. But Ethan is amazing. He can still be argued to be the best crowd control operator in the entire game, and he's a free 4-star. With the module, he becomes a bind machine, almost always binding for a very long time every enemy in a pretty good range. Block zeros are also a really good archetype inherently. They aren't threatened by the vast majority of things, so you can just put them down and let them do their thing, knowing most things won't harm them. Ethan is a very solid A tier. Believe it or not, Mei is also very good. All the good year 1 units so far have been 4-stars. Mei is also a top tier waifu, by the way. Like Ethan, she's another very good crowd control. With another operator we'll talk about in the Year 2 video, they form the 4-star Triforce of surprisingly really good crowd control. Her slow on skill 1 has a 62.5% uptime, lasting 2.5 seconds on a 4-second cooldown. Skill 2 gives her decent damage, a slow with 66% uptime, and a 30% chance to stun that, if procced consecutively, has an 80% uptime. She's very good. A tier. When Mostima's module released, she went from being literally the worst 6-star to being comfortably above average. Her one main glaring issue is, you guessed it, 110 SP. The curse of unnecessarily high SP costs strikes again. And all you got for that was a mediocre slow and solid damage. You had to wait 4 rotations around the sun to use it twice in the same stage. And you still have to. Her module doesn't fix that. Her main glaring issue is still here, but at least now you get an insanely good crowd control. Mostima essentially completely immobilizes the enemies on a wide range for the entire duration. I'd say the 4-star triad of crowd control is more reliable since they can crowd control all the time, but Mostima's quote-unquote burst crowd control is nothing to scoff at. She also has a passive global slow, though it's barely noticeable. B tier. Waai Fu is the fast redeploy literally everybody forgets about. Her main thing is applying silence, which is really not that good on her archetype. First, because silence is really situational on its own, and secondly, because it's preferred consistently rather than in bursts. When you want the silence status for a stage, you want it to be consistent if not straight up passive. This is why Lapland is the best silencer. In Waai Fu's case, you only have an 8-second window to make use of it every 18. E tier. Bison is the hottest male in the game, and it's not even close. If man can't be bred, why did God make him like this? I am sure I can do it if I pound him hard enough. Bison is the operator of all time, with a completely worthless talent that might as well not do anything, and skills that in essence are Quora but a little worse. He's not actually bad though. C tier. Reed is worse than Vigna. Her thing is doing mixed damage, a bit of arts and a bit of physical. This is generally not a good thing. Let's say you have an operator. 50% of their damage is physical and 50% of it is arts. All you've achieved is that now the operator's damage is being reduced by both the defense and resistance of the enemy. It's always better to have 100% physical or 100% arts. 3000 physical damage rather than a 1500 split. Some operators deal so much damage that it doesn't matter, but Reed ain't one of them. She's a fraud. At least until we get to her altar. And because of this, Vigna, who is pure physical, ends up being better. But Super, what if the enemy has high defense? Is it not better for Reed to do some arts damage too so she can still damage him? No, just use an arts operator at that point. D tier. Broca has an extremely cool weapon. Like seriously, this shit is amazing. But that, unfortunately, doesn't translate into a good kit. He switches towards damage when skills are active, which is certainly a weird champ, if I do say so myself. Operators that can switch between arts and physical aren't generally viable. If you need arts, use an arts operator. If you need physical, use a physical operator. The only way I could see this working is with a toggle skill like Mountain Skill 2. He gains slow with 50% uptime, but falls short compared to better crowd controls and better damage dealers. D tier. The Blade's fall off must be scientifically studied. She was a really amazing unit back in year 1, but nowadays only sees use in AFK clear guides on YouTube with skill 2. Actually, back in the day, she also had a niche in 1P clears with skill 3. Does anyone remember that? There is just so much better out there nowadays. Still, this doesn't mean Blaze herself is bad, just unfortunately power crept by at least 15 different units, including Thorns and Mountain. I am gonna slap her smack dab in B tier. Despite her being power crept by everyone and their dog, she still has her own niche as the best AFK option. The other lane holders, while better, either require setup or to be used manually, except Mountain. Umbriel continues our streak of not bad 4 stars. Year 1 may have been a shit year for 6 and 5 stars, but the 4-star stocks were booming. For a long time, she was the only operator with global range. Nowadays, Golden Glow does it better, but Umbriel is still pretty solid. Though her global range is pretty awkward to use, as it hits the enemy with the lowest defense on screen. On stages with environmental tools like the tuners in the Arturia event, this is gonna f you over, as she'll insist on hitting the 0 defense stage hazard rather than the enemies. C tier. Greythroat joins the list of operators. She's just Exusiae but worse, sporting an offensive recharge and overall much lower DPS. She's got nothing else. D tier.
Imagine being an enemy walking up to Neon. You've just completed your Hustler's U course and are part of the War Room. Here you come to traffic your first woman just as Andrew Tate would have wanted. Only she takes literally no damage from anything you throw at her, then drops the Radon Phase 2 orbital cannon on you. Neon is, as far as defenders go, a thinking man's Hoshiguma. While Hoshi is great and doesn't require you to monitor her, Neon can actually absorb a variable waterfall of damage more than Hoshiguma, with her skills. Now while this is great, she is still just a protector defender. While I would personally say I believe A tier is fitting for her, her limitations from her class's role would cause me to agree with Supa's analysis of B tier. While I'm here, if you want more Arknights content, I've got some event and character summaries, as well as some controversial opinions over on my channel.
Ak is probably the single most difficult operator to rank in this series, except maybe Widia. Ak's thing is that he exists solely to buff others and nothing else. And goddamn, he's probably still the best buffer in the game. The issue is that you never really need that. Buffers have become less prevalent lately as new units have become just strong enough on their own. Especially now that CC is gone and harder content is more about crowd control, Ak finds less and less use. Unlike Warfarin, who at least is still a good healer and a decent SP battery. Ak only has the buffs. The buffers like Suzuran, Saria Skill 3 and Shamare are just better nowadays. So Ak goes in D tier, because at least if you do use him, he's still the best buffer. There's just no reason to right now. Hung lives up to his name. Trust me on that one. Unfortunately, he's the second worst healing defender behind Spot. This is because he has a defensive recharge, meaning his use and placements are severely limited because to use him effectively, you need him to be constantly hit. There's few situations where using him is better than Myrtle or Gummy. At least the first activations are really quick. But healing defenders don't really care about that. You use them for consistent healing. E-tier. Kyobee is interesting. Her 3 skills are very diverse. Skill 1 gives her decent crowd control, her skill 2 is the main DPS skill, and skill 3 makes her do physical damage and silence. For the same reason as Broca, that's not that good. The important thing here is her talent, making Kyobee deal up to 75% of the target's defense as extra damage. And by the way, there is no limit to this. What this translates to is Kyobee being invaluable in harder content where enemy stats are jacked beyond belief, like in the Design of Strife. She was so good there because the enemies had 800 Friday Night Funkillion defense, and so she kinda beat their ass. She's not as good as Eya, as she needs certain enemies to shine, but still an A-tier. As enemy stats are gonna grow more and more, Kyobee's stocks are gonna rise and rise. Lazy was the first chain caster and a failed experiment. 80 SP for mediocre damage coupled with an insane DP cost. I don't think I need to say anything else. F-tier. Pure Stream, or Blue Amiya, just kind of exists. I used her to showcase the Gummy Bug back in the day, and that's essentially all you're gonna use her for. Though she has surprisingly good HPS with skill 1, and can mitigate status effects. She just kinda does her job. At least she doesn't synergize with water tiles, you know? D-tier. Bagpipe is, in my opinion, the actual best operator in the game, beside Gummy. It's not a clear-cut best when shit like Ling and Moinar and Sutra exist, but I think she edges it out. While other EX tiers are really good on their own, Bagpipe makes your entire team a lot better by just passively existing as long as you have another Vanguard, mainly Myrtle. She gives extra SP when Vanguards are deployed, making Myrtle instant, yes instant, and helping out other meta picks like Ines and Elysium. Hey, Supa from the future here. I feel I didn't quite explain myself too well in the original script. I call Bagpipe the best unit in the game, and that is one hell of a statement to make with people like Moinar, Sutra and Wizadel going around. I don't want to present this as a fact. Factually speaking, the best unit in the game is Wizadel right now, if you exclude Gummy. This is just an opinion, and how I personally see things. I'm gonna use Plants vs Zombies as my comparison. In this analogy, Bagpipe and Myrtle are the Sunflower, and Wizadel is a row of 5 f***ing Cob Cannons. The Cob Cannon's destructive power is simply immense, and is just about the best thing in the game. But the Sunflower is the basis around which revolves everything else. This is why you can make an argument for Myrtle being the best unit in the game. Having Bagpipe and Myrtle in the same team, sometimes adding Elysium, makes your entire team better by extension. You shit out so many resources that you're allowed to place Wizadel and Moinar and just set up an entire private militia at the start of the stage. So does that mean I think the best plant in PvZ is the Sunflower? Yeah, yes. Beside her broken talent, she is also just a great unit on her own. Lane holding, she can do that. Boss killing, she can do that. She manages to surpass Dreadnoughts due to sometimes hitting multiple targets, being able to up her block count and just dealing a good old ton of damage. EX tier. Bibik was used once in CC4 max risk and then never again. She can stunlock very slow attacking enemies when aided by an SP battery, but that's it, she's just subpar. E tier. At the time Utage was released, she was used as a pseudo-fast redeploy, despite her not actually getting any redeployment time reduction, since she was sort of a arts damage version of Project Red and Phantom, and the only one in the quote-unquote fast redeploy playstyle that had arts damage. That has changed. Now Utage is just a way worse clunky Texas Alter. You could use her with skill 1, but at that point Zuole, Ratalos Noir, Akafuyu, and maybe Hellagur 2 beat her out. E tier. Celsa is tragic. His skill 2 places mines with a delayed detonation. Did you ever wish Meteorite had a delay on her hits? No? I can see why. Some enemies will just run past them before they blow up, mainly dogs and other such creatures. But Super, what if I have someone to block the enemy? Celsa has a talent that increases damage on blocked enemies. This is clearly how you're supposed to use him. Well, that limits his uses. Now you have to make it so he can only hit the enemies while they are blocked, which means placing him in a certain way, or placing the blocker in a certain way, which can either be cumbersome or impossible in certain stages. Still, at least if you do get him to work, he does very solid damage, so he crawls his way out of F tier and into E tier. Conviction is an April Fool's character, they are meant to be terrible. Their skill 1 is awful, but has a very tiny chance to do 1 convictillion damage, which is not actually worth to go for. And their skill 2 is actively harmful in most circumstances. F tier. Phantom's story is one of tragedy and betrayal. Not even the fact there's 2 of them could give him the tiniest niche against Texas and Yato Alter. First Texas came out and kicked him in the nuts, then Yato came over too and finished the CBT job on this poor asshole. There is actually no reason to ever use him anymore, but at least he's not actively bad. If Texas and Yato didn't exist, he'd be in like A tier. Unfortunately, as it stands, he can't go above D tier. Let's talk about Shamare. First of all, have you seen how she dresses canonically? How was this allowed? Anyway, she's one of the best debuffers in the game. She applies Fragile, halves the enemy's defense and attack, and you can place the doll anywhere on the map. Effectively, Shamare has global range. You can place her in a bumf corner of the map and still place her doll where it's needed. The uptime is also really great. She's not quite Suzuran, but still great. A tier. Cutter is actually still pretty decent. She's much like Vigna. Her skill 1 will unleash the might of 1,000 Arabic suns onto the enemies in front, and skill 2 will deal AoE damage. Up aerial enemies especially. She's nothing amazing, but she works and does her job well. B tier. Sidroka doesn't. She's not as bad as Astasia, but not as good as Moose. Her thing is having really good self-sustain, giving her some niche at least. Unfortunately, she's gonna have to share the E tier with Astasia. Despite having impressive milkies, she doesn't quite have any actual role in your squad. She can't lane hold because she only blocks one and hits single targets, but also can't boss kill as her damage is too low. I guess she's meant to be used as a sort of arts dreadnought to duel high priority targets, but there's just way better out there. W, before she got a vomit-inducing design that makes my eyes hurt, is kinda mid. Her only viable use nowadays is with skill 2 as a crowd control. The mines are RNG, but only when there are no enemies in range. Otherwise, they will spawn on top of the ones closest to the blue box. There's way better crowd control, but she works out if you have nothing else. The damage is pretty decent too, C tier. Weedy is also gonna be a nightmare to rate. Either she is an inefficient AoE guard with true damage that is enemy dependent, or solves the entire stage for you and makes it a joke. There is no in between. So I'd be drawn to put her in C tier like Lapland and Liskarm, which are under similar circumstances. The issue with that is that Weedy is generally way better than those two when she doesn't quote-unquote work. Lapland and Liskarm are genuinely useless if the stage doesn't accommodate for them, while Weedy can still do something. Her skill 1 can stun lock slow attacking enemies, her skill 2 can nullify certain stages, and her skill 3 is damn near mandatory for others, while also boasting impressive true damage. She can somewhat work out as a shitty AoE guard if you sustain her while her skills charge. Unfortunately though, she's still a C tier. Elysium is our third EX tier for year 1. He is a side grade to Myrtle, and that automatically makes you meta. First of all, he actually straight up makes more DP than her at the cost of a slower start. Secondly, his secondary niches are just f***ing absurd. He slows, removes invisibility and defense shreds, all on a pretty wide range, while also generating UDP. With him, the Flagpipe trio is complete, and it may as well be the one strongest strategy in the game. For 3 squad slots, which are all also good units on their own too, unlike someone else, you get to shit out so many resources that the enemies simply can't keep up. And we conclude year 1 with THRM-EX. He actually has a bit more merit than his robot compatriots, by essentially just being a debuff you can place on the map for very little DP cost and no deployment slots. He gives up to 30% fragile. It's still better to just use Suzuran, or even Gnosis, but THRM-EX has an actual real use, which is more than you can say about every other robot. I know I've used them plenty myself, especially in IS, C tier. And that's all for now. Holy shit, this video is long. Max out your Gummy. Bye. Well, if it isn't the end of the video. Thank you for watching, and thank you to all the members and Patreons on screen right now. In particular, THRM-EX, Come to Brazil, The Crazy Lord, New Takoyaki, Nubupo, Lord Takio, Gul'Old Leon, Maxio Says, and Chromechan but JJF. That is all, the outro is over, and I think I developed several mental illnesses and attention disorders in the making of this video.
my eyelids. Beach block.